Okay, hello everyone. I'm Nathan Souls. I'm with Zero Carbon Virginia. Zero Carbon Virginia is a group of scientists, engineers, economists, public health experts, and concerned citizens who seek a path toward a zero carbon future. And today I'll be talking about the great progress made on clean energy during the 2020 Virginia General Assembly session. This is good news, which I think we could use a lot more of these days. Before we get to the legislation, I'm going to first go over a few key terms, then a brief look at the energy landscape pre-2020. I'll be asking you guys a couple of questions that you can answer via the chat. And then after that time, if you have questions, you can ask them in that chat. And then Tyler will be asking those questions to me at the end of the meeting, and I'll be doing my best to answer those questions. So without further ado, key terms. How electricity is measured. Capacity, which is measured in megawatts, is the maximum output of electricity a generator can produce under ideal conditions. Generation, megawatt hours. This is the amount of electricity produced over a period of time. So to give you an example, if a wind turbine with a capacity of 1.5 megawatts runs at max capacity for 2 hours, it will generate 3 megawatt hours of electricity. If it runs at 66% of capacity for 2 hours, it will generate 2 megawatt hours of electricity. And just to bring that home, the average Virginia household uses about 13 megawatt hours of electricity per year. So just as a rough guideline, a megawatt hour is roughly equivalent to what you use in a household for a month, roughly. The State Corporation Commission. This is the primary regulatory body in Virginia, and it makes the decisions on whether to grant permits to build power plants and other electric infrastructure. And they also regulate rates. And these commissioners are elected by the General Assembly for 6-year terms. Currently, there's one vacancy, and Governor Northam is looking to fill it. Okay. There's this term you'll see a lot, this phrase you'll see a lot, in the public interest. What this means is that the General Assembly has made a decision to build something rather than wait for the SCC. This circumvents their more deliberative process. So essentially, it just means they've decided to just build it. This is a map of the utilities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There are 3 different categories: investor-owned utilities, electric co-ops, and municipalities. The primary utilities in Virginia are Dominion and APCO. Dominion's in yellow, APCO is in red. Together, they provide about 80% of the electricity in the state. Electric cooperatives, you might be familiar with Novec up here in Northern Virginia. And then a number of cities provide electricity as well. Clean energy and renewable energy. Renewable energy is things like solar, wind, hydroelectric, geothermal, biomass. A bit of a controversy, but it's in the Virginia Code, it's considered renewable energy. Clean energy not only includes all renewable energy, it also includes sources like nuclear and carbon capture. So I just wanted to give you guys a sense of how things were before the 2020 session. So I have a question. What percentage of electricity produced in Virginia came from solar? And this is a 2018 number, because that's the latest that the Department of Energy has these numbers for. So I'll give you guys 30 seconds to answer this question, and just go ahead and got a couple of answers here. Let's see, 5%, less than 1%, 5%. Any more? Okay, Shelley, 1 to 2%. Chris Tandy, 2%. You know, you guys are pretty good. Susan's right. It's less than 1%. So not terribly impressive. What percentage of electricity produced in Virginia came from wind? So I'll give you guys 30 seconds to answer that one.
Kathy's here. Chris, Gina.
Okay, knowledgeable crowd here. Knowledgeable crowd here. It's 0%. There's no utility scale wind in Virginia. We're one of only 9 states that doesn't have any. So clearly on wind and solar, we're lagging behind. But there has been progress made over the past couple of years. In 2018, the Grid Transformation and Security Act was passed, and that declared 5,500 megawatts of solar and wind in the public interest. And again, that means just build it. It's over a period of time, so it's not all built yet. And last year, Governor Northam issued the Executive Order 43, which called for 30% of electricity from renewables by 2030 and 100% of electricity from carbon-free sources by 2050. And this set the table for the legislative session. An executive order, as I'm sure many of you know, can be overturned by the next governor. So the goal of the General Assembly was to codify this into law. And
I'm going to continue.
If you want to, if you want to pass state, or if you're a state that wants to pass, a state or a city that wants to pass clean energy policy, there's one weird trick, according to Dave Roberts. And that trick is elect Democrats. And we did that in 2019. Democrats took the majority in the House and the Senate, and that set us up to do something big on clean energy. And that something big was the Virginia Clean Economy Act. The primary sponsors of the bill, Rip Sullivan and Jennifer McClellan. This was signed into law by Governor Northam on April 12th. So following that, Virginia has now become the first state in the South to embark on a clean energy transition and one of the leading states in the nation on clean energy policy. David Roberts of Vox. So his prophecy was fulfilled. We elected Democrats and they went big on clean energy. So this is a very large bill. It's an omnibus bill with a lot of the different priorities that clean energy advocates have been pushing for a long time. So let's take a look. The centerpiece of the bill is the Renewable Portfolio Standard. And this is the primary mechanism used for transitioning from fossil fuels to clean energy. It's not particularly intuitive, so bear with me. I'm going to explain it here, and then we'll do an example. So it starts off by defining total electric energy as not including nuclear built before July 1st, and it does not include zero carbon sources built after July 1st, 2030. The target is an escalating percentage of renewable energy out of that total electric energy. So it goes up to 100% by 2045 for Dominion and 100% by 2050 for APCO. Just to give you an example, let's say that in 2039, Dominion generates 100,000 gigawatt hours and that the RPS requirement is 75%. Assume that both of our existing nuclear power stations renew their licenses, remain operational, and generate about 30,000 gigawatt hours. Hey, Tyler, can you mute everyone? I'm getting a little bit of background.
This is specifically just him.
I thought it was like 30 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Assume another 10,000 gigawatt hours from zero carbon non-renewable sources like modular nuclear, carbon capture, et cetera. And am I muted? Okay. So of the remaining 60,000 gigawatt hours, 75% of that would have to come from renewable sources such as wind and solar. So that would be about 45,000 gigawatt hours, or 45% of Dominion's total. So we go from 75% down to 45%. So I just wanted to show that that's how that works in this case. And so, you know, the thing to keep in mind here is this is 45% out of Dominion's total. There's a different percentage out of APCO's total, and this doesn't include the co-ops, municipalities. So it's certainly not a 100% renewables approach, but that's not a bad thing. The focus needs to be on decarbonization, not on supporting one technology over another. The primary goal here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prevent climate change. So we need the right mix of energy sources that leads to lower emissions while maintaining reliability and minimizing costs. So this is from a study from MIT where they looked at a number of different decarbonization pathways. They found availability of firm low carbon technologies, including nuclear, natural gas with carbon capture and sequestration, and bioenergy reduces electricity costs by 10 to 62% across fully decarbonized cases. Efficiency standard. So Dominion will be required to reduce consumption 5% by 2025. Dominion currently ranks 50th out of 52 of the largest utilities in efficiency. So they've got a long way to go on this one. APCO will be required to reduce their consumption by 2%. And then after that, the SEC will create new targets every 3 years. The BCA has us join RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. RGGI is a cap and trade program with 10 other states. The way cap and trade works, you have a cap on CO2 emissions for all the fossil fuel plants. The states issue allowances equal to that cap. Power plants then buy, sell, or trade allowances. The cap and the allowances that go with them decline every year. And so you have this market pressure to lower emissions. And one of the key things about that is the states raise funds by selling those allowances. So the VCA will have 45% of revenue used to assist localities and residents impacted by recurrent flooding, sea level rise, and flooding from severe weather. 50% will be to support low-income energy efficiency programs, and the remaining 5% goes to administrative costs. Building renewables. The VCA will require utilities to build renewables and storage, declaring in the public interest 16,100 megawatts of solar and onshore wind, along with 5,200 megawatts of offshore wind, 2,700 megawatts and 400 megawatts of storage for Dominion and APCO, respectively. So just to put this into perspective, if you think back to the Grid Transformation Security Act that I mentioned earlier, that was only 5,500 megawatts of solar and onshore. So essentially we're quadrupling that here. And 5,200 megawatts of offshore is enormous. When this is built, it will potentially be the world's largest offshore wind project. And remember, we were going from zero. So that's a huge deal. Solar freedom. The Sierra Club and a number of other activist groups have long been advocating for loosening some of the restrictions with solar, and they got a lot of those done with this bill. The net metering cap is raised from 1% to 6% of net load. What net metering is, it's if you generate more electricity with your solar system than you consume, then you can be credited for the surplus. After the cap is reached, the SEC will determine a rate going forward to pay for net metering projects. 1% of net metering revenue will be set aside for low-income ratepayers. What may happen when you allow more people to do rooftop solar on their homes, you are taking a lot of demand out of the grid, so this may have an impact on prices for people who aren't building rooftop solar. The size of eligible projects is increased from 1 megawatt to 3 megawatts. The capacity cap is increased to 150% of a customer's annual load. The power purchase agreement pilot program is expanded. This is something that's been useful for schools and local governments for building substantial rooftop solar. 35% of renewable development will be from private non-utility companies. So that will create some competition. Shutting down coal. All coal plants will be shut down by 2024 with 2 exceptions. The Clover Power Station and the Virginia City Hybrid Energy Center, which is a coal biomass plant, was built by Dominion in 2012. We kind of questioned their judgment in building a coal plant so late. And here we are, they're asking for it to be kept alive until 2045. This bill allows for that, and it's really disappointing. It just makes you wonder why does it do this? This was a compromise. This was to get Terry Kilgore's vote on the bill, even though Democrats had majorities in the House and the Senate. Not every Democrat was on board with the bill. So they had to reach across the aisle to secure the votes and make sure the bill would pass. So limiting future fossil fuels. The SEC must now consider the social cost of carbon in their approval process. So previously, the only things they had to consider were cost and reliability. So that makes approving natural gas very easy, because the major downside to natural gas is greenhouse gas emissions. Otherwise, it's relatively inexpensive and quite reliable. So, but now that we're accounting for the cost of carbon, then that's going to make that approval process more difficult. And there's also this report on fossil fuels. This report would recommend whether the General Assembly should ban new carbon emitting facilities altogether. This report will come out by January 1st, 2022. Until that report comes out, no carbon emitting facilities can be approved. So there's a moratorium just until the report comes out, and then after that, it's whatever the report finds. Some shortcomings and concerns with the VCEA. The RPS doesn't cover the entire energy sector. Remember that map. Only about 80%, since it applies to APCO and Dominion, not co-ops and municipal power. Though I will say co-ops in particular tend to be ahead of the curve. Most of them are doing better on clean energy than the investor-owned utilities. It does nothing about the rest of the economy. This only addresses energy. It's kind of funny that the bill is named the Virginia Clean Economy Act when it doesn't address the rest of the economy. Transportation, manufacturing. There are going to be some challenges in decarbonizing these other sectors. Costs. The SCC estimates that ratepayers will see an increase by at least $23 per month by 2027 through 2030. Projects declared in the public interest, as I mentioned before, have less oversight for costs. In particular, the offshore wind project is going to be very expensive, and that's a big driver for these cost increases. That it doesn't reduce emissions quickly enough. The whole point of this is to reduce emissions to get us, to prevent the worst effects of climate change. The quicker you do that, the better. And it's also important to keep in mind that decarbonizing the energy sector is key to decarbonizing the rest of the economy. So we have to do this first, and then, for instance, with transportation, if you are charging your electric cars and buses on a grid that still has a lot of natural gas and coal, then you're still generating greenhouse gas emissions. The APCO efficiency standard is weak. It's only at 2%, whereas Dominion was at 5%. They maybe could have gone for something stronger. But, it does nothing about methane gas leaks. So although the bill, one of the main points of the bill is that we are moving towards clean energy over time, there are still going to be natural gas plants in operation in Virginia. And methane gas leaks are a big concern with natural gas. Methane gas is a very potent greenhouse gas. So it would be nice to see something on that, and this bill unfortunately doesn't address that. But on balance, I think it's a very good bill. Significant build out of natural gas generation facilities is not currently viable with the passage of by the General Assembly of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. That's a quote from Dominion Energy. I never thought I would see the day when I would hear Dominion say that a build out of natural gas is not viable. This is an absolute sea change. Dominion, just months ago, had in their plans continuing to build out a lot of natural gas. So this is huge. Other legislation. This was a big session. There were over 130 clean energy bills. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just wanted to highlight a few here. The Virginia Energy Plan. This is a bill that was sponsored by David Reed and Barbara Favola, and it passed. So the Virginia Energy Plan, every new governor, when they come to office, they must come up with an energy plan within a year of taking office. The plan lays out the governor's vision for energy for the Commonwealth for the next 10 years. These plans tend to be more aspirational, but less binding than what's going to be in the actual Virginia Code. This bill ensures that dealing with climate change is at the forefront of that plan. So some of the goals in the bill: the electric sector must have 30% renewables by 2030, much like the executive order. 100% net zero carbon by 2040. And economy-wide, net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. So as you can see, the goals here are more aggressive than the VCEA, but these are plans, so they're not binding in the way that the VCA is. Nevertheless, it's very important that we make this a part of our plan going forward, so that we're thinking about this, we're doing the analysis on the right path towards decarbonizing Virginia. The Green New Deal. So this is a picture that I took when I was at the Labor and Commerce Committee meeting this session. And you can see it's a very long line of advocates lining up to speak in support of the bill. This is 11:02 at night. It was a very long day. And these advocates were here to support the bill. And they were very passionate. So yeah, there's clearly a lot of support within the environmentalist activist community, but the standard calling for 100% renewables by 2035 is restrictive. It would increase costs, and it's politically risky. And I think that has a lot to do with why it didn't pass. Though I will say that the advocacy from Green New Deal supporters did lead to a lot of improvements in the VCA, like a more aggressive schedule on the RPS, and with the efficiency standards, and some environmental justice policies as well. Retirement of coal or natural gas fired generation facilities. This is Suhas Subramaniam's bill. He is a member of Zero Carbon, so we're of course very proud of him. It's a somewhat esoteric bill about amortization rates and scheduling for shutting down fossil fuel plants. But ultimately what this does is it protects ratepayers. And it's one of the first Dominion opposed bills that the General Assembly has passed in years. Ultimately, what may have tipped the scales in favor of the VCA was not a provision in that bill at all, but a piece of legislation sponsored by another freshman Democrat, Suhas Subramaniam of Loudoun. So when they passed that bill, this gave the General Assembly more confidence that they could take on Dominion and protect ratepayers. And that's why they were able to break the logjam and get the bill passed. Electric school buses. This is I think this is very promising. It has it's a win-win-win. Students will be less exposed to fumes from buses, from the fossil fuel powered buses, and the school systems would pay less in operational costs for the buses. It's cheaper to charge them with electricity, and maintenance costs are lower. And then there's this thing called V2G, which is vehicle to grid, and that's where you use batteries in these vehicles for storage. These buses are effectively gigantic batteries on wheels. So they could be a very useful resource, especially as we add more renewables. You just need more storage. But there were a couple of different approaches to electric school buses. The disagreement was on who pays for the buses and who owns the batteries. So there was one bill that had Dominion pay for the buses, and then Dominion would own the batteries. So they would also own the profits that come with using those batteries for electric storage. The other approach is to publicly finance the purchasing the buses, and then the schools would own the buses, so then they would own the profits of using the batteries. So this is something that is, I think there's a lot of support for it. They couldn't come to an agreement in this session, but I think it's something to keep an eye out for in the next session. And maybe it passes then or sometime soon thereafter. And finally, David Reed's electric car rebate program. So this passed. It's a bill that requires the Division of Mines, Minerals, and Energy to assess whether a car rebate program is feasible. And hopefully they'll say that it is, because wouldn't we all want to get a discount on our next electric car? It'd be really cool. And that brings me to my final slide. I have some acknowledgements. I want to thank our Loudoun County delegation, David Reed, Suha Subramaniam, Wendy Goditis, Carrie Delaney, Kathleen Murphy, Ibrahim Samira, Barbara Favola, Jennifer Boysko, John Bell. They have been great advocates for clean energy. We really appreciate them supporting clean energy bills. And my colleagues at Zero Carbon Virginia, Scott and Leslie Emery, Carl Svoboda, Sarah Ali, Alice Roby, Harrison Craycraft, Jan and Greg Cranston, Dan Turner Evans, Rich Clayton, and Emily Keller. I want to especially thank Jan, because she has been just such a great promoter of this event, and she's put a lot of time and effort in communicating it, and I'm sure she's a big reason why a lot of you are here. And the media, Sarah Vogelsong from Virginia Mercury, Ivy Main from the Sierra Club and her blog, The Power for the People VA, and David Roberts of Vox. I got a lot of my information from these sources, and I'm so much wiser from reading them. So that's it for me. So now I will take some questions.
Awesome. So this is where I jump in, everybody. Hi. What we would like to do, just to kind of help Nathan kind of answer some questions in an orderly fashion, if you could type your question, I will read them out loud. So I know we have a couple of things. I'm just going to start from the bottom and work my way up right now. I can answer Shelley's question in, can we share the slideshow with everyone? I don't think that'll be a problem. Am I correct in assuming that, Nathan?
Yeah, that's correct.
Awesome. All right. So Mark McGowan asked, have you seen Michael Moore's new movie? And if so, what did you think about it?
I haven't seen it. Which movie is it? Like,
called The Planet of the Humans.
the Plight of the Humans?
Planet of the Humans.
Oh, Planet of the Humans. Oh, I have not seen it, so
I want to.
All right, we have a question from, we're going to make Nathan watch the movie, and then I'll record a response from him, and I'll send it to you, Mark. We have a question from Gina that said, there was a slide that mentioned natural gas that you went over a little quickly. Could you please explain?
Okay. I mentioned natural gas in a number of different places. So I'm not sure what exactly you're asking about. You might be, maybe it was about methane gas leaks. Fairly early in the show.
I'll let her, it was in the very early, so maybe the first slide. I do remember, was it the explanation of how much they're going to cut down by, Gina, the natural gas, or how much people are cutting down, like APCO and Dominion? And he gave an example. She said, maybe so. I'll tell you what, while you're looking for that, I'll bring up one other question that we got from Canon. What are the areas of focus for the next assembly session that you'd like to see passed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I'll go back to the, let me get out of here for a second. Some of the shortcomings of the bill. And and this kind of like overlaps these two questions. I think something addressing methane gas leaks would be a good idea. I also think that, like I was mentioning the electric school buses. I think there's a lot of goodwill around that one, and it's a win-win-win. It's just a matter of figuring out who's going to buy it, who's going to buy the buses. So I think that's I think that's a good one to go for.
And I'll just ask to expand maybe just a little bit, because me as a total novice to kind of clean energy activism, I kind of see the perks in both. Maybe having Dominion pay for it might save us money. And then again, you also don't want maybe them getting the profits. So how would you like to see them kind of fall down on?
Yeah, it's like I think the way that Dominion has characterized the bill, they make it look like they're doing this completely out of the goodness of their heart because they are just such good people that care about the environment. But the bottom line is, if Dominion is paying for it, then they can charge ratepayers for it. So one way or another, we're going to be paying for these buses, whether that's as ratepayers or as taxpayers. Now, is there some merit in a utility managing the batteries? Maybe there is. I don't know. I think on balance, I would come down on the side of publicly financing the purchase of the buses. So the taxpayer would pay for the buses, and the schools would own them. And I think that's what would work best. Yeah, I see.
Fair enough.
I see Susan has a raised hand.
Sure. Here, I will. Oh, she's already unmuted. So, Susan, if you'd like to ask the question out loud, go ahead. Susan, are you there? You should be unmuted. Okay. I'll tell you what, we'll come back to you, Susan, and I have a couple questions from the chat for you, Nathan. So when we figure out what's going on with Susan's mic, we'll come back to her. Shelley made a comment earlier that said, oops, just went over. Blue Virginia had an article around April 12th and referenced a sign-on letter that makes the case that VCEA just formalizes what Dominion and other companies were intending to do anyway, and she wanted to get your thoughts on that.
It's hard to say. I mean, like, I think sort of with that quote that I had here from Dominion saying that they, that it's not currently viable to build natural gas as a result of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. If this didn't pass, then Dominion was going to continue building natural gas for the foreseeable future. That was in their integrated resource plan. Dominion is responding to the regulatory environment. So the VCEA, it passing, had a big impact on their planning for the future. But to be fair, the VCEA, it was a process that very much did involve Dominion, and I think to a certain degree, it has to work that way. They are the big utility in the state, and it's really hard for a elected official to just say we're going to do this, that maybe doesn't know as much about how to implement building an electric grid. Yeah, so does that address your question, Shelley?
I don't trust Dominion in any way, shape, or form. So
Yeah,
I'm not convinced the VC turn them around on natural gas. They're getting hit by lawsuits everywhere. All these added up costs on the two big pipelines. I think they maybe just be seeing the writing on the wall, and they went along with the VCEA because of it.
yeah, to a certain degree, yeah, like I think they do see what's ahead of them here, and they do want to get in there and sort of shape the policy so that it works for them. And yeah, there are some fair criticisms about the way the bill's written. It certainly does favor Dominion in certain ways. I think especially with the offshore wind build out, it doesn't allow for the competitive process that it should. I think it's a good thing that we're building a lot of offshore wind, but there's probably a more competitive, cost-efficient way of doing that.
All right, we got 3 more questions in the chat. And then at the end, Gina, we didn't forget about you. I just wanted to get some of the prepared questions in the chat answered, and then we'll try to search to find yours. Chris Tandy asked, does the VCEA spell out a definition of clean, lower greenhouse gases, or just lower toxins like the natural gas industry's definition seems?
Right. So it defines renewables and it defines clean. Clean by their definition is zero carbon. So if it doesn't emit greenhouse gas emissions when you are operating the plant. So that would include things like nuclear and like natural gas with carbon capture sequestration. So that means that you're taking all of the carbon emissions and putting it right back into the ground. Yeah, so that's their definition.
All righty, and Cannon asks, sorry, chat came in and it took it away. Do we have any examples of other large school district or buses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that other school districts have done this. I don't know off the top of my head a good example of one. But that's actually a very good starting point. I think whenever you look at legislation, you know, the first question is, well, who else has done it first? So that would be a great place to look at. I have heard of a study, I think it was in Arizona, about the impact of fumes from conventional fossil fuel powered buses. And the conclusions from that study say that it has a noticeable negative impact on performance for these students. It's, so that's why I really think that this electric school bus thing is something that, I think we should advocate for.
All right. We have a question by Harrison that was answered in the chat. So I'm going to ask you the question and, just so everybody gets a chance to hear the answer. But does the VCEA give Dominion Energy a monopoly on offshore wind?
I believe that it effectively does. They have a lot of control over the project. And like I said, it's a very large project. It could potentially be the world's largest by the time it's built. So yeah, it really does give them a lot of control over that project.
All right, and I'll just read out Susan's comment right below it that agrees with yours at your kind of analysis of it. And she says, Dominion does have a monopoly on offshore wind because the Department of Interior sold Dominion all the leased blocks. Other states have competitive bidding on their offshore wind build-outs. So, Gina, if you're not on mute, I'm checking. I'm going to unmute you, Gina, and we're going to try to take. Great. So, could you explain maybe a little bit further just what you were looking to get answered, and we'll try to find the slide and answer it, to your satisfaction.
Sure. My question was right after the presenter was talking about the percentage that we're currently creating in renewables. And it was like right after that, and he went through a slide that I believe had only words on it. And I remember natural gas was in there, and I didn't understand what was in that slide. And he moved beyond it to, I think, starting to perhaps to talk about the new legislation. So it was very early.
Okay.
Yeah, so Nathan, that should have been right after the questions for the crowd, for the lack of a better term. So we're going to try to find that, Gina. So hold on just for 1 second while we're pulling that up. And if anybody has any kind of last minute questions, feel free to put them into the chat. Otherwise, this may be the last question we have for you, Nathan.
Okay, so this was the end of the percentages, and then
Keep
I got
going.
to.
Keep going.
Did you mean? I bet what you mean is. So there was a.
Keep going.
Yeah, hang on. Was it maybe this quote?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a MIT study on decarbonization paths. So the goal here is to decarbonize the energy sector as quickly as possible, of course, with the goal of preventing climate change. But of course, you have to balance in some of these other characteristics like costs and reliability. And their finding with this study was that availability of low carbon technologies, including nuclear, natural gas with carbon capture and sequestration, and bioenergy reduces electricity costs by 10 to 62% across fully decarbonized cases. What this is saying is that we should have these other sources a part of the plan in order to do this in a cost-efficient way. The cost efficiency also generally means time efficiency, so you can get to lower emissions more quickly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have natural gas? We do, I believe, have a natural gas power stations in Virginia.
A whole lot.
Yeah, and are they going to be affected by this legislation?
Yes.
They're going to be required to do carbon capture? Is that what it is?
So currently about 50% of our electricity comes from natural gas. It's a whole lot. So as part of this bill with the RPS, less and less of our electricity is going to come from fossil fuel sources. So that's generally going to mean that natural gas plants are going to have to be shut down. But you may be able to do things like retrofit a natural gas plant with carbon capture and sequestration technology. So if they're able to do that, and the bill language is a little bit unclear about what degree of carbon capture would be acceptable. So for instance, if you had 80%, 90% carbon capture, would that mean that that source is now considered renewable? Or are we only going to consider it renewable if it's 100%? Or is there some sort of gradient? You know, does an 80% carbon capture on a natural gas plant mean that you have 80% renewables and that you can count that in the renewable category? The bill's a little unclear on that. And that's something that, you know, may be worth clarifying in the next session.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Nathan, we have one more question in the chat. So if anyone else has a last minute question, please type it into there. This one's from Mark McGowan. What about the environmental and carbon toll caused by building solar panels, batteries, and windmills? The cost of nuclear fuel disposal and plant decommissioning?
That's a great question. So the reality with energy is you've got trade-offs. So there's no perfect source of electricity. So we have to balance these trade-offs. We have to think about what our priorities are. I think that a big priority should be decarbonization. So you know, so we're looking for the sources with the lowest emissions, and that's through the life cycle. Solar does a very good job of that, even when you count for the manufacturing process of solar panels and wind as well. And yes, with nuclear, you do have waste. You do have to mine the uranium. But when we talk about renewables, you also have to talk about storage. And that typically means lithium ion batteries. So you have lithium mining. So, you know, that's just the reality of it. There's no panacea of clean energy. There's trade-offs. So, you know, we just have to balance those trade-offs to give us the grid that gives us the lowest emissions, the lowest costs, and the maximum reliability. All right. So a couple more questions came in. I can answer one of them though. So if you need to take a sip of water or something, I can take this next one. It says from Susan. It says, are you all going to post the recording of the presentation as well as the slides to the participants? We are figuring out a way to get it onto LCDC's website and onto Zero Carbon Virginia's website. We are more than happy to email it to everybody. Nathan is in charge of the slides, so if he gets them to me, I have the video of the recording. So if anybody wants the slides and recording, please feel free to email me. I will put my email in the chat for you before we go. And one last question for you, Nathan, and then I think we are just about going to call it a night, unless if there's one more. But Cannon asks, are there any incentives or rooftop solar for households? And then adds, that would be a worthy, or would that be a worthy goal next year? Yeah, I don't think there were any solar tax credits or rebates or anything like that. But that would be a worthy goal to pursue going further. I know Maryland has some incentives, and it's really helped out their solar industry there. So this can be something that helps to develop the household rooftop solar. Awesome. Well, you are getting a lot of praise in the chat, so I will do one big thank you for putting this on. We know this is quite a beast to tackle in a very short presentation, but I think I can speak for everyone to say you did a pretty amazing job. So once again, thank you. Jan Cranston just said, thank you, Nathan, with about 4 exclamation points, and they are very well deserved. So if anybody has any last minute questions, you can email them to me. We can try to get those answers for you. We want to make sure everybody's clear on what happened. And other than that, you know, Nathan, any last words? I just want to say thank you, Tyler, for being such a great host here and helping me out with Zoom. There's a Zoom is a lot to handle, and thank you so much for that. And thanks again to Jan Cranston for promoting this event and getting the word out there. It took that burden off of my shoulders, and because I was focused on the presentation itself. And to Chris Tandy, who's also on the issues committee and helped schedule this and helped get it set up. So thank you all very much. And thank you all for attending. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands, don't touch your face. Have a great night.
All right, you guys just got a great presentation on Virginia clean energy and some good tips for the coronavirus. You're not going to get a better value than that anywhere else. Thank you all for joining us, and I am going to stop the recording and end this thing. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your night, everybody.
All right, bye.